Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's talk. My name is Justin Joseph, and I'll be your host for the day. A little background about myself. I'm a cloud security engineer with a history of working with all things AWS here at Rise 8, focusing on accelerating cloud adoption without sacrificing security across multiple DoD customers. With me today, I'm incredibly excited to have the pleasure of speaking with Nav Sagoo, who is an Azure Apps and Innovation Specialist at Microsoft. NAB has been supporting DoD customers with their digital transformation and cloud adoption within the federal space for years now. NAB's personal hobbies also include biking and music. NAB, how are you doing today?
I am doing really well, Justin. Thank you for having me on this webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited. I think we'll have some great conversation today. Briefly got to meet you at Prodacity, so I think this will be a great follow-up for some of the talk that we heard from you that day as well.
Certainly. I still remember Prodacity from last year, man. What a great event. We had such an amazing attendance and audience that was really excited about not just technology, but, typically what's behind the technology, the people and the innovation practices and the amazing work that organizations are doing all across DoD to really transform themselves to become more digitally native and transformative in terms of how they execute their mission.
Yeah, absolutely. Echo everything you just said, and I think we have a bigger and better one happening this year too, which we'll get to soon as well.
Indeed.
So cool, let's go ahead and get started. So our topic today is around the importance of adapting the organization before adopting the latest and greatest technology. One thing that I've personally seen in organizations who throw around the usual buzzwords such as containerization and cloud native while rushing to implement a solution before the proper education, refactoring, and upskilling to make sure that cloud-based solution takes place. Nav, you've worked across a wide range of DoD clients. Has this been something that you've seen as well? And how do you better influence these orgs of the importance of the prereqs needed before they jump right into the instant adoption mindset?
Yeah, I think, it's customers they go through a very different journey depending upon the state that they're coming from. A lot of the customers that I see, they're coming from an existing system that's been operating for many years, right? We typically consider that to be a legacy system. They are interested in finding a way to move to the cloud because there's a memo that's out there that they're trying to comply with, or inherently they are seeing they might get better value and more benefits from operating in a cloud-based environment that gives them more faster, quicker access to new services, or gives them the ability to better have more security and or lower maintenance costs and operations cost. So a lot of those incentives or motivations play a role in an organization or a legacy system program office deciding whether it's a good time for us to move to the cloud. Some of the prereqs needed before they jump into an instant adoption mindset. I think a lot of the customers, they're not often not very aware of what cloud is everywhere at this point. You've got multiple cloud providers providing pretty much equivalent cloud services. I think what customers need to really understand and maybe ask for is what can that cloud provider do as an industry partner that can go above and beyond than just providing me a hosting environment that's not my data center or my existing data center, right? And that's where we at Microsoft, take a very opinionated, but also a very unique and a differentiated role in really supporting our customers by first giving them the proper understanding of this is what your architecture or this is what operating in the cloud is going to look like for you. We go through a pretty intensive discovery process to understand not just what does it look like for you to shift your applications or legacy systems from one environment to the other, but what mission problems can we really change, right? What things can you not do today that we can really enable for you for your mission if we were to move these applications into a cloud environment? Example that I'll give you is I was speaking to a customer from a legacy system out of the Air Mobility Command, right? They do a lot of geospatial analytics and provide products and services around geospatial products. And a lot of the questions or concerns they had around cloud was first, they have cloud as part of their to be roadmap, right? Uncertain of when it's going to be. Many times they don't have the right funding available. They haven't included migration to cloud as part of their PALM cycle. And then they have questions about what's going to cost me to host it in the cloud. What does the migration process look like, and how much is the migration process going to cost me? And then on an ongoing basis, how is my cost going to increase or stay steady state? So there's a lot of questions that customers come up with, and these are good questions. And we really take the time to both understand the technological problems that they currently have that's preventing them from executing. In this case, this system was only accessible to Air Force personnel who have access to AFNet, but ideally they'd have global user base where customers or users from outside of the Air Force would ideally want to use their products and services as well. So, coming back to the idea of not just here's the cloud, let's get started, here's a cost estimate, but what is the critical thing that we can help you solve by enabling you to go into the cloud? And I think that's for us, at least for me, that's very important. And that's the sort of mindset I bring to help them understand how you can better prepare for a cloud migration.
Yeah, I like something you said there, which was very clear for mission problems you specified. I think something that I've seen too is like in a lot of these modernization talks, the mission outcome is sometimes forgotten, right? Like the technology might be cooler, but like how that's actually affecting a mission outcome and the end users are somehow forgotten. So it's really cool to hear you and how Microsoft does that, where you kind of unravel the complexities of all of that. Just if someone wants to go to the cloud, it's like, okay, let's talk about why that is and what problem you're going to solve. So very cool to hear that.
Yeah. And I think I'll caveat by saying that not every conversation is the same. Some customers are simply saying, just move us to the cloud. It's a lift and shift, right? We don't, here's some money, here's some budget, we need some help, and that's it. It's just a very low, low engagement transaction. But sometimes customers want to be more involved. They want to get more education. They want to make better decisions of what cloud, why cloud, how do we get there? So it's a whole host of conversations depending upon where the customer's at. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and speaking of lift and shift, that kind of segues well into the next question. So you mentioned at Prodacity how as the federal cloud space is rapidly growing, organizations should focus less on moving 100% of their infrastructure at once and more into a hybrid deployment of on-prem and cloud. Can you elaborate a bit on why you think the focus on a hybrid deployment is important here from your experience?
Yes, hybrid is all over, whether it's in DoD, government, or in commercial, right? The fact that we are living in an environment where we need systems, applications, both centrally available, but also there's a need that cannot go unfulfilled because operations or mission operations have to have the ability to operate in a disconnected manner, right? DDoS, in a disconnected DDoS environments. So a lot of the customers, right, and I think it comes down to understanding the mission of the customers we're supporting, whether it's Army, whether it's Navy, whether it's the Air Force. Each of the MILDEPs, a portion of their mission is always going to require a solution where not only something is running in a centralized, space like a centralized cloud, maybe likely in a CONUS data center in a CONUS region, but they're always going to have a need to have forward deployed operations, right? Where systems are retrieving sensor data, they need to process and analyze the data close to where the analysts are, provide reports, generate reports, disseminate that information to the people who need to make decisions and take actions. So the fact that we are always going to be in a hybrid environment is undeniable. And the more we as industry partners really understand that mission space and bring forward solutions to really address that gap, that's how we're going to be, both differentiating in our product offerings as well as making sure that we're really meeting the needs of the customer where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it also, because the concept of edge locations are getting more important as the shift to cloud takes place. And I think the reality of the matter is a lot of these services are not maybe IL6 approved. So to get a proper ATO and good security around your system is probably have to be closer to the base. So that's very, very cool.
Yeah, I think even if you think about just the Air Force, for example, I worked in a previous role prior to Microsoft. I've supported Kessel Run as one of my customers in the early days, and just the fact that Air Operations Center are always going to need a disconnected way to operate in an event, right? That's a requirement that they have to comply with. Like, what happens when all the network comms outside of that AOC are severed? So in that scenario, you have to build and design a system that can stand and operate independently of any sort of a centralized cloud environment or region, and that's a must for so many other customers across Air Force. Navy is the same. You've got I think it was PMW 130 or 230, I forget, but they are the ones responsible for supporting technology insertion and hardware refresh on all the ships that are out there. And when most of the ships are not connected to some sort of a centralized, even they don't have network connectivity to begin with all the time. And then even when they do have network connectivity, the bandwidth is so low, the network performance isn't there. So even in those scenarios, they have to be able to operate when all the connections are severed. And hybrid is the only way in which we can make sure that they have a central base to fall back to, and out of which they can operate. But at the same time, they have at least a subset, if not a substantial portion of those capabilities and mission applications readily accessible local to their operating environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Navy is a particularly interesting one because I believe they can only do the upgrades when they dock the ship. And that docking cycle, sometimes these ships are out there for multiple years. So they're running on legacy systems like 3x, 4x, what the average is. So definitely something there that where like an edge location or closer to the home base would make sense there for like a faster deployment cycle.
Exactly.
Sweet. Next question is, one thing I've noticed in speaking with federal clients is the initial sticker shock when teams lift and shift their apps to cloud without doing any proper aptX or refactoring prior. And I think what teams are slowly realizing with the cloud is that it's not always, if not ran efficiently, it's not sometimes the most cost-effective option. And is that something you've noticed as well? And how do you proceed with the education of the fact to the teams that you interact with?
I have. I think, again, it depends upon the life cycle of the legacy system and where it's at. Many times legacy systems, because of sort of how funding is aligned to those programs, they're in a sustainment stage and they're still following the old, I'd say, or the legacy budgeting and approval and accounting processes in terms of how funding gets allocated to those programs. And for the most part, the sustainment funds that they get, they're not either, they don't essentially qualify for any sort of modernization or refactoring work that could potentially lead them to better outcomes and maybe better operational agility for those systems. So in those scenarios, there's not much can be done. But what we are starting to see more and more is customers who have a lot of those legacy systems starting a conversation early on of like, hey, as you're thinking about building the next generation of this weapon system or this, back office business and enterprise, business or enterprise system that is not, warfighter facing, but is still required for maybe logistics and other operations within the Air Force, starting from a good technologically sound baseline that meets current open source standards, or it meets the current standards in terms of technology, as well as how software is being built and deployed. Educating those customers on those sort of practices. That way, as they're starting to think about a new baseline of software that they're starting to bring forward, they are starting from a clean slate, which empowers them essentially to adopt sort of the right technologies, right? Kubernetes, containers, things that are more popular and more standard these days, and gives them the opportunity to, slowly deprecate their existing legacy baseline once they have enough functionality in the new application that they're about to bring. So that's one way in which we handle that conversation. Sometimes customers are interested. I'm supporting a customer right now, I think out of the Air Force Test Center, where they have primarily about 19 to 20 set of applications that are all written in ASP.NET. And the customer itself took the initiative of modernizing their framework from ASP.NET to .NET Core. One of the main reasons for why they're going through that modernization phase is they have a lot of integrations with legacy Air Force systems, right? That they need to rely upon, and many of these legacy systems don't have any API interfaces. So one of the imperatives that they've taken on in going from ASP.NET to .NET Core is actually building APIs, not only for their own applications, but other applications that can rely upon these APIs to be able to access those systems. So a lot of these customers, right, depending upon the phase and sort of how intrinsically motivated they are to modernize, they are certainly adopting newer technologies or at least newer frameworks and finding better ways of moving to a much more cloud native space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said there for intrinsic motivation. That a lot of that groundwork that you're talking about prior to doing any type of technology related tasks are only going to help them in the long run. So I think that's very important how you said that, right? Like it's more so going to help their transition process rather than trying to upskill later on and having to learn from a completely new baseline. So educating from a new baseline, it makes perfect sense in that case. Cool. The title of our talk today is Adapt the Organization Without Just Adopting the Technology. And we've touched on some of those aspects already in our conversation so far. Government agencies should not just adopt the cloud, but adapt themselves to be more cloud native in order to get full value. In your experience, what has been the biggest roadblock with federal customers looking to get to the cloud?
Contracting. It's probably one. I think things are getting better. I think the government, particularly the DoD, is realizing that cloud is the future, right? There's still questions that come up depending upon, again, who the program managers are, how aware they are of what's the larger trends that are happening in DoD. But we see from, typically DoD leadership at the high level, they're all encouraging program managers to take an active role, take an active initiative in understanding, hey, what do you need to get to the cloud? And whether that is understanding the sort of, whether that's understanding the migration process, getting cost estimates, and including that as part of your POM cycle. So maybe not this year, but maybe in 2 or 3 years down the road, you have the funds allocated to go through that, the cloud migration journey. I think we're seeing that more and more. I think some of the organizations that I work with, it varies. For example, sometimes the leadership that a lot of these program managers report to, unfortunately, there is mixed messaging in terms of there is requirements or there is encouragement to go to the cloud, but then there is no follow-on support that's provided to these individual programs. And now they're stuck in sort of this, they don't have what is really needed in order for them to move forward. For example, I'll give you an example. You're working with a system out of Hill Air Force Base, and I think they fall under the A4 category. The program manager very interested and excited to move their system to the cloud, sees a lot of value, but just the fact that they have to coordinate so much with contracting with existing hosting provider and understanding what the current cost is, and then being able to provide artifacts and documents to whatever their hosting environment is, in this case Cloud One, it just sometimes can be a bit of a slow and delayed process. So I think leadership not only needs to provide encouragement as they currently do today, but also follow up with the necessary support to the different programs so that their words and their actions are in greater alignment than what they are today. That's one thing that I've seen. Another roadblock that I've seen across some of the customers is not necessarily the incentive model, but customers are for the most part risk averse. We understand that in government, in federal government, the sort of, if you don't change anything, the risk is very low, as is, right, status quo. And that means nobody, if something does go wrong, and there are a lot of these are mission systems as well. So certainly we are trying to minimize the change. But one of the biggest roadblocks that I've seen is just this idea of not wanting to take a risk, not wanting to take a managed risk, and understanding what this application or what this system can look like if I was to migrate to the cloud, and understanding the ramifications of that. Part of the conversation often turns into, well, we have an existing ATO for our existing environment. How does that ATO change, or what do we need to do differently to get a new ATO in a cloud-based environment? While that's not a big roadblock, we have to still work with customers, because that's an additional work that they now have to take on to be able to process not only their system in the cloud, but having to go through a bit of a reaccreditation process. So I think the more DoD at large can simplify, as well as make it easier for these individual programs to say, hey, if you go to the cloud, here is sort of a better path for you that gives you better compliance, and it reduces the effort for them at the end of the day, right? It comes down to reducing the effort if they move to the cloud. And if that's the case, I think more program managers would have the right incentives to be able to take that risk of at least starting a conversation and seeing if this is something that they want to pursue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on a lot of very good points there. And one thing that I think I've noticed too is the lack of reusability across a lot of federal orgs. And it's almost like when you talk to one client and we talk to another client that's very closely aligned, it's still like a black box, like a more like starting from point A to point Z all over again. So I think there has to be some sort of like common, inheritance model we can use for all these different orgs, where it's not such a, starting from ground zero again. So that inheritance and risk averse, hopefully it would help some of that.
Yeah, I think one of the other questions that we often see a lot when it comes to impediments of moving to the cloud is a lot of these customers, when they initially accredited their systems, they were accredited at impact level 4, 5, 6, and when we have a conversation with these customers about what is the right sort of environment in which they want to move as they're moving into a cloud environment, a lot of the times many customers don't know that what's actually a proper accreditation environment to host their application, right? We actually are running into a couple of programs that have deployed essentially commercial technology, right, to support their mission. And because they have PII data, there's lack of understanding or knowledge of like what classification level should we be hosting this system, because it has certain information that the system is capturing, which technically would qualify as PII. Even though those systems are provisioned in a government cloud environment, but they're not accredited to sort of the right impact level. So there's a lot of questions that these government customers are wrangling with in trying to figure out, who do we even go ask to get clarity on what accreditation level should our system be hosted at, so that we can make sure that we are in compliance. Sometimes that can also, at least in my scenario, it has come up quite a few times, and that's been a bigger roadblock for some of these customers to move into Cloud One particularly.
Yeah, agreed. And I echo the same sentiments. I think in my experience, it's not only who do you go to, but there might be like 10 assessors, and it's like they all have like a different pillar, right? So trying to find the right contact who's going to approve your IL level and deal with your ATO is kind of like a black box in itself. So that does make it pretty hard for like a app that doesn't really know what their level should be.
Yeah. I don't think this is a roadblock, but I still feel it introduces more resistance to the cloud migrations. DoD is still relying heavily upon, I'd say, legacy ways of securing systems. For example, ACAS scans and HPSS, when we have much more newer ways of securing, assessing vulnerability and tracking the security state of any system that's deployed in the cloud. And part of the, I think, challenge that many customers, as they're looking to move to the cloud, is trying to wrangle with, why do we need to still adhere to these legacy sort of security, commercial tools again, right, that were adopted in the DoD a while, many years ago, a long time ago. But there has been no change in policy, no change in compliance, right? And a lot of these systems today, they're running in PaaS services, or they're running in an environment like container services that HBSs and other systems don't really support very well. So I think there has to be some sort of a change in policy as well, that could help reduce the resistance for many of these programs, so that they can get better security, meet the same or exceed the level of compliance without having to be restricted by legacy sort of security tools that that their system was asked to use.
Yes, absolutely. I think we got time for one more question, if that's okay.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. So last question is, one thing I've noticed about my limited time working with their DoD customers is, as you're pushing more modernized approaches, you're more likely to run into personnel who have been working with some set legacy system for over 20 years, kind of like what you mentioned before. And sometimes it's very difficult to influence a change of behavior for folks that have been doing something a certain way for so long.
Right.
As there's a stronger push for the adoption of cloud architecture, this then requires those personnel to relinquish a certain amount of control, which is sometimes very hard to do. So in your experience, has this been something you've seen? And how have you been able to address the sort of mentality clash between the two sides? And where do you believe the DoD org should place the highest emphasis of upskilling of their current staff for this sort of inevitable problem that we're all facing?
Yeah, I think the aspect of who has control certainly becomes an issue at times. Traditionally, what we have seen is a lot of the programs or applications, they are relying upon a centralized ACOM squadron or a team that is providing the core infrastructure. And to some degree, they're responsible for not just the core infrastructure, but also provisioning the servers, managing the staging process, right? All those things. So application teams are having to just focus on the application and not so much on the infrastructure management. Now, when they move to a cloud, unless those customers adopt PaaS services where virtual machines are managed for them, they don't have to worry about staging and managing operating systems. The application teams then are now responsible for sort of supporting the infrastructure lifecycle. And sometimes that becomes a concern for these programs to move. And that's where we come in and say, okay, what can we do to help either modernize the system just enough so that we can host it in a platform, a PaaS sort of service. That way you're not having to deal with provisioning virtual machines, managing their operating systems, and going through that process. Or if that is sort of the state for now, what can we do to help you get to that level of compliance using some sort of automation or other things that we have built? So you can start from as is, but maybe we can work with your ACOM squadron or your current infrastructure providers and help train that team to take on some of the responsibility of managing your systems in the cloud as well. And that's a conversation we're having with a customer out in the West, where ACOM squadron is responsible for all of infrastructure. And one of the questions they're asking is, we know our systems, our applications are going to move to the cloud. We want to help them. And we want to understand how we can better prepare for those systems as they're going through the cloud. And one of the conversations we're having with them is, what can we do to help you, the infrastructure providers, understand cloud concepts so that when those applications do move to the cloud, you can still have an important role in supporting those applications, especially if those applications are continuing to rely upon legacy legacy application security services or other services that application teams don't typically engage with or know very well. So, I'd say, education, showing empathy certainly goes a long way. an understanding of how best we can help all the supporting parties make sure the interest, as long as interest is there, helping them support sort of the doing the right thing by the customer is where we typically show up and really be successful. Yeah.
I love the word empathy you use there. I think that's key, right? Because last thing we want to do is just go in and tell someone else how to operate or what to do. It's more so like, hey, this is the journey that we want to take, and this is where we see you guys fitting in, and just like best make it a collaboration effort. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think that's all we have. So thank you, Nav. This was super valuable. And for those in the audience, thank you for joining us in the conversation today. Nav, if folks want to reach out to you to talk more, how can they best find you?
Sure. You can always reach out to me via email. My email is navjot, last name Sagoo, SAGOO, @microsoft.com. I'm also somewhat active on LinkedIn. So if you send me a message there, if you find my name, certainly send me a message so we can chat more. And just reach out. If you have existing Microsoft points of contact, you can always reach out to them, and they can always refer my name, or they can always put me in touch with you. So multiple ways in which they can reach out. Really excited and looking forward to Prodacity this year. I'm hoping to meet many familiar faces and hopefully some new faces as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope to see you there as well. Thanks, Nav. And last note for everyone out there watching, don't forget to check out what we currently have planned for Prodacity 2023 and sign up to receive updates at rise8.us/events/Prodacity. Really hope to see you all there. Thanks again, Nav. It's been an absolute pleasure. Can't wait to see you again soon later this year, and hope everyone else has a great day that's watching.
Sounds good, Justin. Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.